All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And I'm happy to welcome to the show today Yonah, Jeremy Bob, and Ilan Evyatar. They are the authors of it's a book. It came out in 2023, but it's incredibly timely today. It's called Target Tehran, How Israel is Using Sabotage, Cyber Warfare, Assassination, and Secret Diplomacy to Stop a Nuclear Iran and Create a New Middle East. Yonah, Jeremy Bob, and Ilan Evyatar, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Great to be with you, Matt. Thank you.
Great to talk with you. Let's just start broad. So this book obviously was written more than a year ago, but wow, it has become even more relevant probably than it was when it debuted. What do you all make of the last? And I'll start with Ilan. What do you make of just the developments the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think, we warned in our book or predicted or whatever you want to call it that if the world doesn't take the Iranian nuclear threat seriously, if it doesn't enforce a diplomatic solution, if it doesn't reach a solution that is acceptable to Israel, then by late 2025 we expected Israel to attack Iran's nuclear program for various reasons. In the wake of the events of October 2023, or the events set in motion by the massacre of October 7, 2023. Incidentally, just a couple of weeks after the book came out, there's been a configuration of circumstances that really led this to happen. Hamas was destroyed as a military force of any significance. Following that, Hezbollah was basically decapitated, its leadership killed, its missile arsenal severely depleted, and to the point where it didn't interfere in the current conflict and said it wouldn't interfere. Then the Assad regime fell because it didn't have Hezbollah backing it anymore. So, Israel had this entire corridor leading all the way up to Iran. It also had a sympathetic ear in the White House in President Donald Trump. And in addition, last October, when Iran struck Israel with 300 ballistic missiles, Israel hit back and destroyed Iran's best air defenses.
I'm going to ask Yonah the same question, but I do want to mention, wow, there is a picture out of Prime Minister Netanyahu in the war room with your book on his desk. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that if you're a book author, but I'd love to get your take on, wow, what is that like? And what might he actually be picking up? What could he learn from this book?
Look, we have to be humble and not think that, the entire Israeli war plan was taken out of our conclusion chapter. But our conclusion chapter did describe an attack of Israel on Iran's nuclear facilities, and a lot of it was right on, spot on. The additional pieces, that nobody foresaw, certainly back in 2023, was that Israel would go even bigger than that. The idea that Israel would strike Iran's nuclear facilities was like, oh my God, will they take this huge risk, huge gamble? And the idea that they went beyond that to also take apart a lot of Iran's ballistic missile facilities, a lot of their military chiefs, went way beyond that. And then, once it went on, they bombed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters and the Basij headquarters to sort of reduce the regime's ability to oppress its own people, maybe make room for, if protests start again, it'll be harder to stop the protests. So all of that is not something we got into. Just the idea, that Israel would go after nuclear facilities, that we called, and we were very gratified that Netanyahu was at least looking at our book during this time period while he's managing the war. It has been, yes, fantastic for book sales. The one other thing I just want to add, from Ilan hit pretty much all the important points about sort of why we thought Israel would attack. The one other thing I just want to say very clearly, October 2025 was and still is when a lot of the restrictions and a lot of the teeth of the nuclear deal from 2015, which is still functioning, expire. And so there actually is still a clock that's ticking that if Iran doesn't agree to extend some sort of nuclear limitations by October 2025, we could see some more action.
Oh, well, tell us more about that, because that's something that, so you're talking about the is it JCPOA deal that Obama had struck? Um, tell us, you've sort of teased that, but what could happen?
So I would say that, first of all, one of the reasons Israel attacked now was it was before those things expired, and attacking later would have had a lot less leverage. But if Iran hasn't extended the deal by then, that is basically making a statement, we are going to try to reconstitute our nuclear weapons program. And I think the declaration that Israel has made through this operation is, Israel always said, it won't let you, it won't let you. And so
Mm.
if you start to try to do it again, if you pass that deadline without extending the limits, I would not be surprised if Israel attacks again. It might not be a giant attack because, frankly, most of the nuclear program has been eliminated. It's not obliterated. There are pieces that exist, but a lot of it has been, damaged. And I wouldn't be surprised if Israel attacked again if Iran tries to rebuild.
That's a great question. I'll go to Ilan on this one because there are reports here. U.S. intel suggests the strikes did not destroy the sites. So, do you think that what has happened with the United States and Israel, the attacks, have actually set back Iran's? Have they just delayed Iran's nuclear ambitions, or have they permanently ended them?
I think it's very early for anybody to really say. At the moment, what we're seeing is kind of initial satellite images, and it'll take a while before there's a full intelligence picture. But Israel's analysis differs from the American analysis. The American analysis looks at, say, Fordo and says, we destroyed X% or whatever, whereas Israel is taking a more holistic look at the whole complexity of the program. The main facilities have all been severely damaged. We know that much. Iran's industrial complex has been hit. The uranium conversion facility at Parchin, where any metallization and weaponization of enriched uranium would take part, has been destroyed. At least 14 of the lead scientists of the program were assassinated during the operation. 9 on the opening night, and 1 just hours before the ceasefire. So the knowledge contained, or the knowledge of how to do all this nuclear work may not have been eliminated, but the people who hold that knowledge have been eliminated. So restoring the program isn't a quick fix, and Israel will be watching and ready to take action if the Iranians do attempt to reestablish any of the program.
And let me ask Yonah. I mean, we saw, a year or so ago how Israel was able to use those exploding pagers to kill Hezbollah terrorists, which is just an amazing, sort of just unbelievable, bit of I don't even know what we would call it, kinetic activity, for lack of a better term. And now, as Ilan was saying, taking out these top scientists, I mean, that's hard to do. How is it that Israel has the, intel capacity and boots on the ground to pull off these maneuvers?
I'm going to answer that. I just want to make one comment on the whole what has happened to the nuclear sites. It's so important that we don't politicize the issue. All right, there should, if one agency in the United States or Israel says they got 80% and another says 60%, it should all go out there. Politicians, either in Israel or the United States, shouldn't be like getting angry at intelligence officials for doing their jobs. The most important thing is to know what actually happened. That's just a side comment.
Yeah.
In terms of, how did they do it? So if you look in the first chapter of our book, we call it the nuclear heist. This is how Israel borrowed, permanently stole Iran's secret nuclear files in 2018. And basically, not 1 or 2 agents, but dozens of agents penetrated. They had different teams doing different things in order to, break this part of the site open, spy on this part of the site, do decoys so that people wouldn't follow the right spies who would basically grab not a thumb drive but like boatloads, bookloads, shelves of the original files to smuggle them out of the country. And so basically everything that you saw Israel do on June 13th when all this started, they'd already done it before in somewhat smaller operations, but dozens of agents to expand that to hundreds of agents. And if you look at the chapter we have on the assassination of the founder of Iran's nuclear program, there, Robert Oppenheimer, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, that was done with a remote control gun sitting on a vehicle, just like they had all of these remote control vehicles doing all kinds of things. And if you look at our book, we also describe a couple of instances where drones were sent to blow up nuclear facilities or drone bases. So every single piece of what Israel did on June 13th, they had done large-scale dress rehearsals. They knew how to do it. This was just expanding it. How has Israel penetrated Iran so deeply? You have to look at the population. They have 90 million people. Tens of millions of them aren't Shiites. They're other kinds of Muslims that really hate the regime. And none of those people, if they're helping Israel, even see it as treason. They see it as helping themselves fight a regime that they hate.
Oh, that's very interesting. And then obviously, I
Can
mean,
I just add
Israel.
a couple of points there?
Oh, yeah, please, please.
Sure. So, I mean, Yonah talks about the 2018 archive heist, which we go into in great detail in the book. So, I mean, that was really, it wasn't just a smoking gun. It wasn't just something that Israel used to entice or to draw the first Trump presidency administration to withdraw from the JCPOA. It was also like a roadmap. It really gave Israel the keys to Iran's nuclear program and much of the intelligence that it was able to use to really understand every aspect of it and hit Iran so methodically now in this operation that began June 13, and also on the issue of penetration of Iran, intelligence penetration. I'd like to quote the former Iranian intelligence minister Ali Younesi in June 2021. He said, all officials in the Islamic Republic should be concerned for their lives because of the Mossad's influence in the past 10 years in different parts of the country. So like Yonah said, for over 2 decades, Israel has completely penetrated Iran at every level.
And when it comes to pulling off these operations, it is impressive and obviously sophisticated. I do have a question, though, about the accuracy of the intel. I mean, here in America, especially coming kind of from the left, there's been a lot of criticism of Netanyahu. And there's been the observation that for 25 years, he's been saying that Iran was 3 months away from going nuclear. And so I wanted to just get your thoughts on that, because it's sort of like the boy who cried wolf. And here in America, we're chastened by the lack of weapons of mass destruction, the WMDs that were not found after the Iraq invasion. How do we know that this time it was legit?
So look, the claim that some Israeli officials made as if Iran was about to come out with a bomb like really, really soon, that's an exaggeration. I forgive all governments when they take a major war stance, they sort of, make it as strong sounding as they can. That was an exaggeration. But the idea that Iran has the capacity within days to weaponize 10 to 15 uranium enrichment worth of, to make bombs. The IAEA, the UN nuclear inspectors, said that the day before the operation started. So that's not in dispute. It's not a question. The question was how close they were to being able to do some additional tasks when you detonate a nuclear bomb, when you put a nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile. Those things are a little bit more difficult than just firing a regular ballistic missile, which Iran is very good at. And those require a little bit more time than the enriching the uranium itself. So there was a debate. Would that take 3 months? Would that take 6 months? Would it take a year? So Israeli officials believe that they'd gotten it down to a few months and that was a short enough time period that Iran might be able to sneak out to nuclear Iran without people seeing it. So even if they were a few months away, it wasn't like Israel would be able to say, oh, this is the date they're going to do it. And so they basically needed to do it now.
can I just add? I mean, it's not Israel isn't the United States. It doesn't have B-2 bombers. It doesn't have these, massive ordnance bombs. It can't conduct the kind of one-night strike that the US can, and it works on a different clock. It's not going to let Iran get within days of being able to put together a nuclear bomb. And on top of that, like I said before, there was the window of opportunity. No Iranian proxies, no ring of fire to attack Israel, an aerial corridor all the way to Iran, a sympathetic ear in the White House. That might not return. And then, in addition, Iran is also building this huge ballistic missile arsenal. One of the reasons that Netanyahu gave for the strike was that Iran is building up an arsenal of, wants to build an arsenal of 10,000 plus ballistic missiles. And we saw, you can see, just one of these can rip through a 7-story building, create enormous damage, blast damage in a radius of hundreds of meters. So that in itself was an existential threat by Israeli perception.
There's talk, of course, of regime change. How likely do you think that could be, and is that something that Israel should even want?
I think it's unlikely in the next, couple weeks, or month. But the fact that Israel did bomb the IRGC headquarters and the Basij headquarters, right? The Basij are this 2 million strong militia, which Iran created when they saw what happened in the Soviet Union. When Russian soldiers didn't want to shoot their own people, they said, oh, wait a second, we can't count on the army. Our army might not want to kill our own people. And Iran need to be able to kill our own people when they protest. So they created the Basij, and Israel bombed the Basij. So if there is a big democratic protest movement in the coming months, and if you get, I always think they need some large Iranian general to side with them, then I think it could happen. And so I think it is more feasible now than it was at any other time in the last few decades. That said, Iran is probably the best authoritarian regime other than China at oppressing its own people. It has a very strong game plan for doing it. And so even with everything Israel has done, I don't think you can expect regime change. I think it still will be an uphill battle.
I think regime change is obviously very desirable from Israel's perspective. The Iranian regime is toxically anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. As long as it is in power, it will work to undermine Israel. Its goal was to destroy Israel. It had a clock in the middle of Tehran, in one of Tehran's main squares, with a countdown to 2040, when according to Ayatollah Khamenei, that was when Israel would be, by then Israel would be destroyed. I think what's instructive is that during the research for the book, we spoke to many Mossad officials, and one of the things that they wouldn't talk about is regime change. So when you look back at that in current context, I think that says a lot.
So obviously, one concern after bombing Iran's nuclear facilities and assassinating or killing some of their top nuclear engineers is the possibility of blowback, right? Whether that's terrorism or sleeper cells or whatever. It looks like Iran tried that. Tried to do something in Qatar, but it seems sort of feeble. Do we believe, or do you believe, that if Iran had the capacity, that we would have seen it already? Or is it the case that they will, on their own timetable, find a way to try to retaliate?
So look, it's very risky for them at this point. I don't put it by them to try some, covert terror operations here and there, but they've been hit really, really hard. And there's a message now from Israel that if Iran messes with Israel, Israel isn't going to just hit its proxies, it's going to hit Tehran. And there's a message, frankly, from the United States that if Iran crosses certain lines, the United States can hit Iran. So anytime now that they think about an operation, they're going to have to think about covering their tracks much better, because is it really going to be worth it to them to, let's say, attack a Israeli or American embassy in Europe if the answer to that is going to be the IRG's headquarters gets blown up again. So that's something they have to think about now that they didn't have to think about before. I think it reverses all of the momentum. The momentum before was be careful around Iran. They're crazy. Who knows what they'll do? And now I think that's reversed.
So there was some sense the other day, though, that President Trump was critical of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu for not accepting the ceasefire. There's a sense that President Trump really likes the framing of a 12-day war. And as someone who likes to be a TV producer, he had produced this show and it has to end. And so do you believe that this is a relationship? Because here's the thing with Donald Trump, right? I mean, he seems to be capricious. Sometimes he could be Israel's best friend. And then I could imagine a scenario. He criticized Netanyahu after he congratulated Joe Biden on the 2020 election. So, like, is this someone, do you see Donald Trump as kind of a natural ally of Israel or someone that really has to be kept on board constantly, maybe the way that Winston Churchill initially had to court FDR?
Yeah, I think Trump is somebody, as you say, very capricious. You never quite know what's going on between his ears, and he never really wants anybody to know what's going on. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Benjamin Netanyahu has to court him. I think he really enjoys that, but he also likes to be on the winning side, and Israel was really on the winning side. And I think all of this was very much coordinated. I mean, if Trump gave the Iranians 60 days to agree to a deal, to agree to zero enrichment, to agree to dismantle any military aspects of the nuclear program. I think had they agreed, then we would have seen a deal, and we wouldn't have seen Israel attack. Israel wouldn't have been able to attack. It wouldn't have been able to go against Trump in that fashion. So, but I think they're pretty much coordinated, and at the end of the day, despite all the theatrics, I think they've thought this through and thought through where it might go in terms of wider normalization between Israel and other countries in the Middle East.
So there was a sense after October 7th that Benjamin Netanyahu's reputation was forever tarnished because this was this huge intel failure. It happened on his watch. And but now he's got some points on the scoreboard. I'm wondering how you believe this latest development will impact his legacy.
So I think it's obviously strengthened him on the right in Israel. Maybe it's strengthened him somewhat with some people in the center. But so far, the initial polling hasn't changed that much, which means if there was an election today, he would have the plurality, the largest single party, but he wouldn't have the government. The center left would have the votes to form a new government, either with him or without him. But he wouldn't be the prime minister if there was an election today. The reason is that unlike the Israeli-Palestinian issue, which splits Israel apart, how should Gaza be handled? How should the Palestinians in the West Bank be handled? There's always a debate about that. There really wasn't a debate about Iran. Everybody was on the same page about Iran. And so whereas, again, he could get big credit points or big minus points in how he handles Gaza, I think for Iran, people wouldn't have expected that the other people who would run against him, let's say Naftali Bennett or Benny Gantz, would have handled it much differently.
Interesting. So here's a question that's a little weird. I bet you haven't been asked this one yet, but I'm curious about this. I don't know. Did you see the debate between Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson that took place the other week?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it's kind of
so one of the
things, sound bites.
Yeah, me too. I didn't watch the whole thing, but one of the clips that went viral was where Ted Cruz was explaining that growing up kind of as an evangelical, going to Christian Sunday school classes, that he was taught that Israel are God's chosen people, and that God will bless those who stand with Israel and curse those who oppose Israel. Tucker sort of scoffed at this, saying like, well, you don't even know what verse in the Bible that comes from. It's from Genesis. And then saying, do you think that the Israel of the Old Testament is the same as the Israel from 1948 or whatever, that this is the same entity? And so I'll throw that to you. Is Israel today that same Israel?
Wow, that's a tough question. I mean, yeah, Israel today is obviously it's not the same geopolitical entity, but Israel is a race and a religion and a people, and Israel is the same people that have maintained the same beliefs, the same prayers, the same desires for thousands of years, that have looked to Jerusalem, have prayed to Jerusalem, have said every year, next year in Jerusalem, throughout the 2,000 years of exile. So it's very much the same people tied to the same place.
What do you think, Yonah? Is he right?
Look, this is a complex question that has religious and nationalism, historical sides to it. I would say that there's definitely a group of people that throughout the ages stayed connected to the land of Israel. Ilan described all sorts of religious prayers, and people made pilgrimages, and there apparently were some people who were able to sort of hide from the Romans, right? I mean, there was a Israeli state, a Jewish state in the land of Israel for a very long time, until after two rebellions against the Romans. The second one, the Romans really got rid of almost everybody, but apparently some people stayed all the way through. So even if exactly doing the lineage, this person who spent 500 years in Spain, and this person 500 years in North Africa, and this person 400 years in Poland, how do you connect it all back to the people 2,000 years before, is a complicated question. But I do think there is a deep connection on a whole number of levels between the Jews who live in Israel today and the Jews who were there in the past.
This is also not, this is beyond the scope of your book, obviously, but there was a Democratic primary in New York yesterday, and a Democratic socialist was elected who I don't exactly know his background, but I'm given to believe that he's not Jewish
He's not
Americans.
pro-Israel.
Yes, we could say that. What do you think of that? Slash, are you concerned about the direction America's heading?
I'm going to just add something on that previous question. A quote from the great Jewish medieval poet Yehuda Levi, who said, I am in the West and my heart is in the East. I hope I got that right, or it's not the other way around or whatever, but that's kind of, sums up the connection. As for American politics, I'm going to pass that on to Yonah.
So look, what I would say is right now, the Republican Party, as it has been until now, is very, very pro-Israel. The mainstream middle of the Democratic Party has been very strongly pro-Israel. Most independents have been pro-Israel. What you're seeing is a growing group on the sort of harder left of the Democratic Party. They have a squad of 4 people. It's larger than 4 people today. And you also have a growing aspect on the isolationist Republican Party, who's not necessarily as in love with Israel. And I think that this is something that Israel has to keep an eye on. I think sometimes Israeli prime ministers, especially Netanyahu, have not always worked to keep Israel to be a bipartisan issue. Sometimes they've politicized, things themselves, gotten involved on one side or the other, usually on the Republican side. I always think that's a mistake. I think that Israelis need to work with both parties. Things swing back and forth in the United States between Republican and Democrats. You never know exactly where it's going to land. So that's an advice point that the Jerusalem Post puts out, is Israel needs to work with both parties. In terms of the New York mayoral race, I guess all I can say is I hope that if he wins the mayoral race, which he probably will, then he will be, as he said, the mayor of all New Yorkers, which includes a lot of Jews. And so that would include moderating some of his views that he might have had when he wasn't the mayor of New York. We'll see what happens.
So there is a sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that if Iran's nuclear ambitions are stalled, that it will be more likely that other Arab nations could join the Abraham Accords, and that this could be, Donald Trump is fostering an environment where some of these Middle Eastern countries are maybe, especially the younger folks, are less tied to kind of their traditional hostilities and anti-Semitism, and more interested in like making money now and moving into modernity. A, am I right? If I frame that correctly? And B, do you think can Israel really trust? Because I'm skeptical that Israel can really trust, even putting Iran aside, and we know that they're probably the worst actors and sponsors of terrorism. I'm skeptical that Israel can really trust some of these other countries, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think our book. You mentioned the subtitle of our book, which was also included not just cyber attacks and sabotage and assassinations, but also secret diplomacy. So the book talks not only about Mossad's role in all of that, in blowing things up, it also talks about Mossad's role in fostering diplomacy with moderate Sunni countries in the region. Before October 7, it was kind of sort of, when, not if, Israel would normalize relations with Saudi Arabia, and after that with many other countries in the Muslim world. One of the goals of October 7 very much was to derail that process, and it's become much more difficult. The Palestinian issue is sort of back on the agenda. The Saudis are insisting on a Palestinian state as a precondition for any normalization. But I think the interests that led towards this in the first place still exist. The dust will settle, and at some point, we'll see normalization. Sorry, my phone just switched on. We'll see normalization.
You're not getting calls from Mossad, are you? This is
no.
Get off the phone with Lewis. We don't trust him. No, I know you guys. You're both. Am I correct? You both came from the journalism world, right? You were kind of newspaper writers before you wrote the book. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Am I right? Okay.
Yeah, we were both at the Jerusalem Post.
Cool.
Yeah. If I could just reframe the premise of your question about the Sunni moderate countries who Israel's normalized with. Israel just beat the hell out of a whole bunch of their brethren, Palestinians in Gaza, some Lebanese, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they are still normalized with Israel. None of them withdrew from the Abraham Accords. After 20 months of this war, I use the expression I did, Israel was acting in self-defense, but the fact is, from their perspective, they've seen what Israel has been doing, and they stayed with the normalization deals. So I think those normalization deals are here to stay, and it doesn't mean that Israel would entrust all of its security to these people. It doesn't mean that Israel is going to get rid of the Israeli military. The Israeli military is going to grow after October 7th. But I do think that the new normalizations they had with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, Sudan, and the peace deals that they had already with Egypt and Jordan, I think all of them are here to stay, and I think they all could still expand, including the Saudis and others.
I think you could probably tell by the way I'm interviewing you that talking about this is me speaking a foreign language. I am not, by no means am I an expert. I'm trying to learn. And so this has been, I appreciate you all coming on. It's been really helpful. So before I let you go, either what should I have asked you? What did I get wrong? Or are there any stories or insights from your book that you'd like to share that might, whether or not they have to do with Iran, that might surprise people?
Ilan, you got Meir Dagan in the chess set?
Yeah, I interviewed Meir Dagan many years ago, shortly after he retired. So a couple of points on that. Was
Wait,
one
he's the
that
Mossad director from 2002 to 2011.
he's the legendary Mossad director. He's the guy who really sort of put the war against Iran's nuclear program at the top of the agency's priority. He had a very reputation as a very daring commander officer. He once tackled somebody with a live grenade and took it out of his hand and put the pin back. One of the things he said to me when I interviewed him, we were talking before about knowledge, was that he alluded that you can't eliminate knowledge, but you can get rid of the people who hold that knowledge. And the other anecdote, which Yonah is talking about, is he was late 60s, I think. A couple of years later, he would die of liver cancer. But when the photographer came to photograph this chess set, he just jumped up and stood between the chess set and the photographer before he could even sort of press the shutter, because this had come from somewhere that he didn't want us to know where it had come from, or he didn't want that to be public knowledge that he had visited that place.
And I'll just add that you get, in addition to Meir Dagan, if you read our book really introduced Yossi Cohen to the world. He's the Mossad chief from 2016 to 2021, when Iranian nuclear facilities are blowing up left and right. Their nuclear chief gets assassinated. Their head of the IRGC Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, gets assassinated, and the Abraham Accords happen. So if you want to get to know these Mossad chiefs, the book, I mean, it's a history book, but we had at least a few book reviews that said it read like a fiction thriller. So it's an opportunity to sort of really get deep into the spy world.
And not just Yossi Cohen, if I may say, but also David Barnea, who's the current head of Mossad, and the guy who led this operation from Mossad's side.
Speaking of blowing up, this book is blowing up right now, and it was pictured as we mentioned on the desk of Benjamin Netanyahu. So we've barely scratched the surface. Get it? It's called Target Tehran. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on the show. Thank you.